Hello everyone and welcome back to Shock Talk. We have an exciting episode planned today and we have a new guest with us. So we're just going to get into it and see how you guys feel about it. But just to kind of hint at what we're going to talk about today so you guys can get your Google mechanism running, we're going to talk about the new Toyota truck platforms. And we have our so-called BILSTEIN expert on this product here today, Ryan, one of our sales interns. Tell us about yourself, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm a sales intern here at BILSTEIN and done a lot of research on this TNGAF platform, and I'm excited to be on the podcast and talk about it today.
How did you find your way to BILSTEIN? Is this an interesting story, one you want to tell, or do you want to skip over that?
Yeah, I can go over that a little bit. I've always been into cars my entire life, kind of more on the tuning side though. And I did see that BILSTEIN here in Poway had a lot of internships, and I wanted to join the sales team and gain some experience. I'm currently a student actually at UC San Diego, and so thought it would be really fun. I've been here for almost a year and a half now, and learn something new every day. Super fun.
Would you want to share your major with us?
Yeah, I'm actually a political science major with a concentration in data analytics and a business minor. So
a guy who's a car expert has that major. What a waste, huh?
Well, maybe he can keep our off-road roads open.
Exactly.
Politically.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us as our modern Toyota expert. We've got a lot of things to cover here today, so we don't want to speed through it. We want to kind of just cover all these things a little bit in detail, because this new platform's pretty darn confusing. I mean, we even get experts that are confused about this. So we're gonna kind of take our time and walk through this thing little by little. So this new chassis platform, we were talking about this before we started. It's a modular platform, and exactly what vehicles does it cover?
So in the US, this platform covers the Tacoma, the Tundra, the 4Runner, the new Land Cruiser 250 series or Land Cruiser Prado, the Sequoia, the GX550, which is also a Land Cruiser Prado, and the LX600 and the LX700H, which is a full Land Cruiser 300 series.
So Toyota saved a lot of money with this design.
Definitely, but it's also kind of cool because you get that fully boxed frame. We're transitioning out of the open C channel frame on a lot of these platforms, especially with the Tacoma. And so I think there are some benefits to the consumer.
Definitely. Now, I asked you before we started, a guy that knows the Tundra versus the Tacoma, they're different widths. Mm-hmm. So they compensate for that how?
I think a lot of the compensation is through control arms and track width through the suspension.
So, but the body itself is wider. I don't quite understand how they get a wider body on such a narrow chassis. I guess they just widen the suspension underneath it and place the body.
Yeah. The TNGAF platform is extremely modular, and so there might be a width element to it too.
Be able to extend the width and things like that.
But it's certainly interesting that they were able to get so many trucks on the same platform.
That is really amazing to me. Now, we got Shane here from product management. He's the one that has to manage us building products for all these different vehicles. So Shane, what's your take on this new platform and all the variables that we have to compensate for from BILSTEIN's standpoint?
Well, I mean, that's what they sold us. That's what they said. But when you look at the chassis and you look at the suspension, it doesn't really kind of look the same across the board.
It doesn't. And it doesn't match up for us as a shock builder. It doesn't look like something that we can manage as one part fits everything. It looks like it's going to be a little bit of a battle.
No, like the Tundras and the Sequoias have like shorter shocks than the Tacomas and the 4Runners, which was confusing. That's really weird to me. So there must be like inboard and more inboard versus more outboard. They mount differently. I was expecting to be able to use the same shock across the board, different valving, and that's not turning out to be correct. Like on the Tacoma versus the LC 4Runner, they have like a different lower eyelet. The Tacoma's got a double shear.
Typical variables that you find in a uniform platform, right?
So
like the Tacoma's got a double shear 16 millimeter lower bolt, and the LC and the 4Runner have a single shear 3/4 inch nub coming off the front of the control arm. So now we've got to build two different rod ends.
Yeah.
Right. And
so we got our work cut out for us.
Yeah. Oddly enough, the front Tacoma shares a lot with our Bronco.
Whoa. Now that's weird. Ford and Toyota get together on the shock design, that's kind of weird. So with these vehicles, I'm seeing that there's a huge array of options as far as suspension's concerned out there. Stuff that we haven't even heard of before. So we're all familiar with TRD, TRD Pro. Trail Hunter is fairly a new term. And then there's all these electric and air suspensions. Can we kind of break that out per vehicle and tell the folks what they're up against if they're purchasing each one of those?
Yeah, definitely. So on the Tacoma, obviously standard, you get standard shocks from the factory. When you move up to the Pre-Runner and the TRD Sport, you get sport tune shocks from the factory. And then when you get to the TRD off-road, that's when you start getting our BILSTEIN OE offerings. And so those would be the red shocks that you get on the truck. Then the next step up, I guess at kind of that top level of the model line is the Overtrail and the, or
not Overtrail, it is the Trail Hunter.
Trail Hunter. That's on the Lexus.
Yes.
And the TRD Pro, and with those you'd get an Old Man Emu setup or the Fox setup.
The Fox on the TRD Pro. So the TRD Pro is considered the top of the line for off-road capability, and more or less. I'm thinking Toyota's kind of aiming this at a Raptor killer type setup.
Yeah.
Even though it's a small engine and all that kind of stuff compared to what the Raptor's got in it these days. But that's their idea, is it's going to be that desert, top of the line Raptor killer type setup with the TRD Pro.
What's interesting is the Toyota TRD Pro BILSTEIN, or not TRD Pro, but the Toyota TRD BILSTEINs are ESCV, like with the Ford Bronco.
So they have the little piggyback reservoir. They're painted red, in case folks don't notice that the OE TRD BILSTEINs are painted red instead of the famous BILSTEIN blue and yellow, right? So folks looking at that on the lot go, what are those red shocks?
Yeah.
It's a BILSTEIN, believe it or not.
Yeah, so Toyota TRD like obviously like that technology, and they used it on the on those vehicles. And I guess it's an upgrade from years past, because it's a position-sensitive damper.
And they actually switched the rear shocks to a 46 millimeter on the those instead of the 36 that was back there before.
Yes, so larger diameter, and they have a piggyback reservoir, and they have position-sensitive damping. So ESCV is end-stop control valve, so it has basically a hydraulic compression, secondary compression piston, secondary compression valving, and then obviously with a rebound as well.
A lot of bang for the buck at that level of performance, I would think.
Exactly. And I've always at least in my opinion, I've always kind of maintained that TRD off-road Tacoma, I think is the best value in the lineup.
Yeah.
You get the ESCV BILSTEINs. That's when you start getting into the opportunity of optioning the stabilizer disconnect mechanism and the rear locker. So a lot of the off-road specific features, you start to get in it on that level on the TRD off-road without going too crazy on the price. And I know one of the complaints that a lot of people had on this platform was that it seems a lot more expensive than the third gen Tacoma.
Right.
But I think that there are a lot more options on this platform. You can get like 360 cameras and the JBL speaker that pops out of the dash, but you don't necessarily need to get all of those options.
Right.
And I think I would get a base TRD off-road.
Right.
That would probably be my pick.
So what's the price difference between a TRD off-road and like a Pro?
I think the TRD off-road starts around 44, at least at the time of filming, and the Pros are around 60. So you do see a huge price increase there.
And where does the Trail Hunter fall in that mix? Just below TRD Pro?
The Trail Hunter and the TRD Pro are very, very similar in price. I think they're both positioned as kind of that top of the line vehicle just for different audiences. So the only way to get a hybrid crew cab long bed Tacoma is actually on the Trail Hunter. So they're aiming it more towards overland people who want a little bit more bed space, maybe don't necessarily want to do as high speed off-roading.
But a hybrid motor battery pack for an overland vehicle?
Yeah, so that's the direction Toyota is taking with this. And a lot of people have, a lot of mixed reactions I've found on this engine. The T24A FTS, the 2.4 liter turbo with optional hybrid system on these. But personally, out of all of the options in this new TNGA platform, it's actually my favorite engine. It's a pretty simple design, actually, despite being a turbocharged 4-cylinder. You don't have any electronic wastegate. You have a typical, air-to-air intercooler, very classic design. You still have dual injection, so you don't have carbon buildup or any of that issue or any of those issues with a purely direct injected motor. And it's actually very similar in design to the 8AR FTS, which was a Lexus 2-liter 4-cylinder that was used since 2015. So the engine is essentially a 10-year-old design now. And my experience with those Lexus motors was pretty good. They never really had too many issues, and I've seen them at 200,000-300,000 miles.
So are the Pro and the Trail Hunter only available in the hybrid?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
That is just weird. You get a battery pack with the 4-cylinder when you buy the high-end truck.
Yeah.
That is weird. I mean, we'll have to see how that works out.
Well, let's back up for a second. So a Pro or a TRD off-road that has lockers, possibly a sway bar disconnect.
Right.
44,000, maybe 50,000.
Right.
Now you're getting into one of these higher trim packages for 65.
Yeah.
So the problem with those is that they're only lifted maybe an inch. I think most people in the aftermarket are looking for at least 2.5. A lot of people want 3 inches. That might be a little tall, but it doesn't make a lot of sense if you want to have like a 2-inch lifted truck to go buy one of these higher trims like a Pro or a Trail Hunter. You can buy the TRD Pro, and you've got what, $14,000?
Yeah.
$20,000 to play
in
with?
savings, to go ahead and build the truck the way you wanted it. Again, I agree with you that trim level is probably where most folks are going to land.
So if you're looking at a TRD Pro, which has, designed for high-speed off-road, we're in development on our 8112 system for the Tacoma, and I will tell you, it is freaking rad. And you could probably buy that system for $5,000.
And build your own TRD Pro is what you're saying.
But better.
Yeah.
Better because the shock... And
you don't have the hybrid motor mixed in there. You don't have the high price tag. Well,
the shock technology in our 8112 system is
and it lets
way
you
more
lift it a little bit higher. Yeah.
So you can get a 2.5-inch lift rather than a 1-inch. So it's like if you want to buy a TRD Pro, just know you're going to be... If you want it a little bit taller, 2.5 inches of lift, which I think, these things need all the help they can get if you're off-roading, right?
Definitely.
You're going to end up throwing away that suspension, which basically you're spending $15,000 for suspension.
For all the gimmicks and gadgets and all that kind of stuff, when you could probably build from regular TRD level and probably get a truck that, like Shane said, is suspension-wise better and more reliable without all the hybrid stuff on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I would go for that TRD off-road, no options, maybe the stabilizer disconnect if that's something that you find valuable. Get that
huge deal.
Yeah, flex is good with off-road.
And I like that system more than, KDSS, which we'll get into, just because it's just so much more simple. You're just disconnecting the sway bar, and you're now able to flex that front suspension all the way to the bump stop, which is amazing. But I would get that. You could even get the manual, which is something that Toyota kept for this generation, which is really awesome. So
you were saying the manual is only available in one option or trim level.
So the manual is available on SR, SR5, and some of the TRD trims, but it's definitely available on the TRD off-road, only with the short bed though.
Okay.
But I would probably do a crew cab short bed, manual, TRD off-road with the rear locker, the stabilizer disconnect mechanism, and then save that $15,000 and build something cool with the 6112s or 8112s.
And that consumer, we don't need to tell people what vehicles to buy, but that consumer, I'm thinking, is the guy that's going to go, look for the small, narrow trails, get way off-road with that truck. It's not a full-size truck. It's a mid-size, so you got a lot more room to move around. Of course, space, you're limited on tow capacity. You're limited on, so that's where Tundra comes in. Is a little bit more space, a little bit more tow capacity. Now, let's get onto the Tundra. What engines do we have available in the Tundra?
So with the Tundra, it's a very similar story. You have one gas only engine, and then you have a hybrid adaptation of that. And so with that, you have the V35A FTS, which is actually a 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. So think in terms of design methodology, very similar to like the Ford 3.5 EcoBoost that we're all familiar with. So similar power numbers out of this new Toyota motor, but you can definitely get that low end torque from the hybrid system as well.
What do you think the towing capacity is on, let's say, the newest 22 plus Tundra platform? Do they list that?
I think it's around 12,000 pounds.
That's pretty good for, what is that? It's a V6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, and so in my eyes, I think the Tundra is really comes into its own with overlanding. I think you get a little bit of a bigger platform, you get a more comfortable truck, something that you would, I would definitely want to take a Tundra over to Tacoma, like on a cross-country road trip or something like that. But we definitely have products coming for the Tundra as well to kind of build out a nice overlanding platform on that truck as well.
Well, we're going to make something for all of these vehicles, but Tundra, I think, is already done.
Yes.
So we have product available for Tundra. What do we have available for Tundra?
Well, we've got 5100s, which are ride height adjustable in the front, along with 5100s in the back. We're going to have rear springs here shortly within the next month.
So being that this is now a coilover, we can offer a rear spring,
Yeah, so you can lift the front, I believe, up to 2.5 inches or 2.2 inches extended, or lift, and then we have a 1-inch lift rear spring that is coming soon, and so you can kind of have still a little bit of a rake, but now we can lift the front and the back with coils.
Similar
it's
to
a lot
Bronco.
Easier than with in the past with having leaf springs.
Right.
So, and then we've got a 6112 on the market, which is a larger diameter 2.5-inch shock, or actually 2.6-inch diameter shock, with a coil in the front, also 2.2 inches of lift. And then on the rear, now this one is a new product for us. It's a 6100. Usually on the rear, we would pair that with a 5160.
Right.
But the way that they built these trucks, an episode a long time ago, we had a 6112 and 5160 and explained
how they work so good together. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of it has to do with force, velocity, and displacement of a piston rod. Well, the new Toyotas have this long shock body, and we're able to, with kind of a shorter travel versus the body,
package a 60.
And we're able to package a 60 millimeter standard shock.
Yeah, a lot of folks have been asking for that, so that's cool. Now on the rear,
so it'll be a 60 millimeter front
and rear,
and 60 millimeter rear, or for our friends in America, 2.6
exactly
diameter outside diameter front, 2.6 outside diameter rear.
Now I haven't seen one of these on the lift yet. So on the rear of that truck, is it a coil over, or are the coil and shock separate?
I think it's a divorce setup.
Okay,
yeah. Yes.
On the rear,
it's divorce.
It's divorced. Not a word I like to hear. So 60 millimeter available for the rear on that truck. And are we going to do the 8100 to 8112 type setup on that truck as well?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
We're going to use this. Will we pair on the 8112 system? Will we pair a 60 millimeter back there?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. The 8112s and 8100s for the Tundra are probably going to be released this summer. And they're going to be really trick. And the back's actually going to be a new configuration for 8100. And we'll also be carrying, since it's like a shared platform, we're going to be carrying this lineup on the rest of the Toyotas. So
nice.
The Tacomas, the 4Runners, the LC.
So it'll follow the same design principles. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll be able to get a 60 millimeter, 6112, 60 millimeter rear, 6100 on all of these, and then the 8100 level products are going to be actually probably some of the trickiest stuff we've built so far. And that'll be trickling out through this year.
So I know a lot of folks that are watching this are probably wondering why Toyota went from leaf to coil. Now, I've got two experts sitting here. What's the benefits of each, and why did they switch to coil? What's the best answer for that?
Dude, I mean,
nobody wants to dive in. That's a scary question.
Well, it's going to give you a more comfortable ride.
Coil springs, more comfortable.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would add?
The downside is it doesn't carry load as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So along with this Tundra, we do have a heavy load Tundra rear spring coming as well. So we have a standard load, and we have a heavy load, and both of them are a 1-inch lift, but the heavy load is a 1-inch lift with like 500 or 600 pounds.
But no matter how you slice it, a coil isn't going to carry load as well as a leaf. And so they're kind of aiming these trucks more for comfort than, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but it definitely can be done. You see trucks like the Ram 2500 with coils in the rear, and that's obviously a full heavy-duty truck. So it is possible, and I think Toyota did their due diligence with that.
I do like the rear suspension design, the way it looks and the way it works. And if you look at, you know, cars designed for crawling, they're generally a 4-link rear using coil springs, not leaf springs. Although there is a leaf spring crew out there that can get some pretty crazy stuff done on leaf springs too. So
coil spring's just going to ride a lot better.
Yeah, I think it's more for the comfort.
Like the old Toyota platform Tacoma versus the new Tacoma, it is not even in the same league as far as ride comfort goes.
Right.
Out of the box.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on a first-gen Tundra, and the leaf springs had a purpose, right? But I truly feel that the new trucks do ride a lot better. However, I'm not a big fan of the motor problems they're having with new Tundra, so I'm just going to keep my old one for now.
Yeah. If you do really like leaf springs, though, and you do want a leaf spring truck, what's interesting about this platform is the SR Tacoma actually does have leaf springs.
And pre-runner.
Yeah, and pre-runner.
That is really weird.
Yeah, so now you have to deal with the option of leaf or coil, and there's another monkey wrench in us designing shocks for those things.
Well, the leaf is only available on a certain cab configurations. I think the extra cab. And only in the SR and the pre-runner, I believe. And I think maybe there might be another trim where it might kind of split on the cab type.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting I don't know why they did that. And it's also an undersprung leaf, which, like in the pre-runner world on Toyotas, they like that.
That is. And we were thinking that they maybe designed it for like a fleet truck or something like that. But it turns out that with a little bit of, you know, knowledge and a welder, you could make that a pretty capable little truck with leaf springs on the back.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pre-runner Toyota people, they'll put the leaves undersprung because the leaves are on top of the axle and it bottoms out on the frame.
Right.
So if you go undersprung, then you have like
more travel,
more up travel.
Yep.
So did they do that to appease the off-roader, or did they do that because it's supposed to be a fleet truck?
Just make it easier to make.
And then the question is, the off-roaders, are they going to gravitate towards that at some point?
Yeah, you just wonder, will they go with the 4-link style coil suspension, or will they stick with what they know and go back to the leaf?
The 4-link's going to be limited on travel because it has a track bar. And so, I mean, I'd imagine that if you wanted to get more wheel travel out of an off-road truck, the leaf's probably going to work good. And you can get a Deaver leaf pack. So they feel awesome, you know? And, it'll be interesting to see if people
where they go for the heavily modified versions.
Yeah.
Well, there's still a few more vehicles that share this platform. So let's talk about the Sequoia briefly and some of the highlights of that one.
Yeah, so Sequoia is very similar to Tundra, very similar platform, but only available with the hybrid, which is interesting. And like the Tundra, you can get AVS and air suspension on the rear on the Sequoia. And so that's something that maybe we want to talk about and kind of qualify a little bit.
This one, I think, is completely kicked out of the off-roading pack now and
it is
the soccer mom.
It's in the off-roading pack.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that?
Because it's the U.S. version of the Land Cruiser
with air suspension.
Well, you can get them without air suspension.
It's optional.
Too.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's trims. They even have a TRD trim.
Okay.
And so I think that's a winner. I mean, it's really expensive.
Yeah.
But they went from the old Sequoia had an IRS, which isn't really that good for off-roading unless it's a UTV. IRS makes that for
exactly.
But the old one was IRS, and it wasn't really a good platform for the off-roaders because IRS IFS was this kind of a weird combo, especially if you don't have sway bar disconnect and things like that.
Right.
But anyways, they went to a solid axle in the back.
Oh, nice.
So they went from this IRS platform into a solid axle, and this is the U.S. Land Cruiser.
Nice.
So if you're looking for a full-size, really capable off-road SUV 4-door, I mean, that's going to be it.
The Sequoia in a non-air
Yeah,
trim level.
non-air, non-AVS. So basically a base Sequoia
Right.
will probably be your best bet. And then kind of like with the same methodology as the Tacoma, buy a base truck and really spend that money modifying.
Fix it up the way you want. So this one would actually fall into overlanding. This would be a great overlanding.
I think it'd be a great overlander because it's not as long as the truck.
Right.
And you can carry
A lot of gear, yeah.
All kinds of stuff.
Put a rooftop tent on it and you're good to go. You can sleep above and carry all the gear underneath.
I know I looked at the VIO numbers on Sequoia yesterday, and they're not selling that many, but I mean, I think that would probably be one of the ones I'd be interested in.
Definitely. Sure. I think probably one of the most underrated vehicles on this new platform, for sure.
People are skipping over it for the fancy stuff, you know, in the Runner and the Tacoma. Not really looking at Sequoia, even though with the new motors and stuff like that, it's going to be a fair player with gas and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's going to, and you get the bigger truck, more space, more room. I didn't know that. I thought we were stuck with soccer mom stuff here.
No. And we have a 6112, 6100 for the Sequoia. And, you know, since it's the same as the Tundra, we're going to adapt 8112s to it as well.
Is it the same as the Tundra front and rear or just in the front?
The shock packaging is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the front shocks are the same as a Tundra, what we're offering.
Right.
The rear shocks got different valving.
Because of the weight distribution and things like that. And the shorter, it's actually a shorter wheelbase, I would guess, as well. So there's a couple more crazy ones that share this platform, and these guys have a different name.
Yep.
It starts with an L, a Lexus GX550 and an LX600.
Yeah, so those two are obviously, you know, from Lexus division, but they are still on that Toyota TNGAF platform. GX550, you can still get some with no AVS and no EKDSS, which are two limitations, I guess, for shock design. So we may have something for those at some point in the future.
We will.
And LX600, LX700H, those are kind of complicated just because they have AVS and AHC, the active height control. And so those are the hydraulic suspension that you guys are probably familiar with. But that is one of the ways to get a quote-unquote real Land Cruiser 300 series in the U.S.
Now, do they offer them with a base suspension, with nothing?
Unfortunately not.
Oh,
so you get the... what
Ew.
was that suspension again? The hydraulic leveling?
The AHC, so that's a different system than the Sequoia and the Tundra's air rear. So that's just a simple airbag in lieu of a spring.
This is more like X-Reyes?
Yeah, it's similar. So this is all, you know, it's hydraulic. There's a pump. There's, you know, high pressure hydraulic lines, and, you know, all kinds of, you know, actuators and things like that.
It's supposed to be like more stable on the trail because it's supporting the vehicle when it feels one side getting light. It pushes down and re-levels the vehicle and things like that. But it's just way too complicated if you want to be an FYI guy and fix your own stuff and all that kind of stuff. It's not gonna help you out on the trail if that breaks.
100%.
Sounds like a full luxury vehicle and not an off-roader. But maybe in 20 years,
Yeah,
when
people actually get caught up with the technology, right? It's going to take that long. I mean, how long did it take for people to really comprehend X-Reyes and how it actually works? Most people just disconnect it and say, forget it, I'm not working on it, and it's no longer needed.
Well, what I'm saying is, like with the GX, like the GX was out there forever, the old GX, and it had those KDSS, or it had the X-Reyes and all this garbage. And then eventually they got a little cheaper, and people are just tearing this stuff apart.
Exactly, yeah.
So maybe like in the future, if you know, when the price comes down, maybe you can take all that stuff off.
Yeah, as they get older and used and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you see a lot of that with the older Lexus vehicles. You see a lot of people turning them into overlanders because the prices come down to the point where you can buy this former luxury vehicle and make it a little off-roady and go some killer places with it.
Yeah, I would never say never on that platform, especially on that LX700H over trail, which just came out. I think, as far as I know, that's the only way to get a 300 series Land Cruiser that's triple locked in the U.S. So with a front locker as well. And so I anticipate that would be pretty popular in the used market maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah, with the people, like for now, the people that have that kind of money probably aren't going to spend it on that truck, right?
Yeah.
Or if they do, they're not going to do crazy stuff with it, right?
They're going to drive to the mall.
Yeah, exactly. Cars and coffee, right?
Well, not even cars and coffee. I'm talking the mall.
Just for hauling to the mall, right?
Yeah, so for that platform, maybe get your LX700H. use AHC, and when the warranty runs out, we'll maybe
tear it apart. Yeah. So we quickly covered all these. Hopefully we've given some people some insight. Ryan's done a great job collecting a bunch of very confusing data. I mean, I was looking over this morning, and I'm like, there is no way. I mean, I can't believe they've mixed all this stuff together. Yeah. But let's give the folks kind of a general overview here as we kind of wind down. So we said for Overlander, the person looking for an overlanding vehicle, we said GX or Tacoma. Does that still fit?
I think for overlanding, you may want a little bit of a bigger platform. Okay. So potentially Tundra, Sequoia. Okay. I think the GX is still a good overlanding vehicle as well. And one thing that we maybe didn't talk as much on was the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser 250 series. So the new Land Cruiser. And those may be good options as well. 4Runner, it's very similar to Tacoma in terms of just architecture. Yeah. Yep. It's actually built in Japan. Same with the Land Cruiser 250 series. So if that's something that matters to you. And with the Land Cruiser, you're obviously getting that full-time four-wheel drive. With the 4Runner, it's a mix of both depending on trim level. So between part-time and full-time. There are some AVS to watch out for on the 4Runner, I think on the Limited, but there's no more X-Reyes anymore.
Good.
And so that's been phased out. And so most 4Runners are just a normal shock that you can replace without having to worry about any electronic stuff, which is really, really nice.
What's interesting on the GX is it has the twin turbo V6 though.
Yeah.
So that is pretty cool.
Yeah. So the only way to really get that V6 in that Prado platform, at least in the US, is on the GX. That's correct.
Interesting. But the new 4-cylinder motor with a turbo is pretty badass.
I know. I had a hard time seeing that work in an actual truck. You know, you remember the old days when we had the Toyota before it was called a Tacoma? Yeah. It had the little 4-cylinder in it. And I remember back to actually driving those trucks, and if you weren't towing with it, that had a lot of power. Then they put the V6 in them and started calling them a Tacoma. And it just seems like over the years we've got so used to V8s that the technology in these 4 and 6 cylinders is really, really coming into play now.
The 4-cylinder is, I'm really impressed with the power delivery, and it feels really good.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the older trucks, and that's one thing I really like about the 4-cylinder, especially in the Tacoma at least. It kind of reminds you of those
old. You back to that old truck.
It's kind of a buzzy engine, low revving engine. A lot of the torque is down low, especially with the manual. It really feels like an older truck, which is kind of cool.
So as we kind of wind down this episode here, I know we've put out a lot of information, and we're going to let you guys digest that here while we have fun, a little bit of fun together. So out of all these vehicles that we just talked about, we're each going to have to choose one and call it the one that we would choose for what we do as far as our hobby, off-road or on-road. So Shane, you go first. Which one would you choose?
I would take the Tacoma for sure.
The one that we talked about, the TRD, plain TRD trim?
The TRD trim. I'm going to get the sway bar disconnect for sure. Then I'm going to be putting our 8112s on it. I choose the Tacoma because there's so much. I like to go off-road camping.
Options.
Some people call it overlanding.
Yeah.
But like being able to put whatever you want in the back, I think is a lot better than trying to put something on the roof of an SUV. So I'm going to choose the pickup truck.
Okay.
And I really like the way that the power delivery is. And I did go for a ride recently with our 8112, 8100 setup, and it's freaking rad.
Phenomenal.
So, like it feels like you're in a like a UTV almost.
Wow.
In a way, like not exactly, but you can hit some stuff really hard, and it doesn't make any noise, and like it seems like it's gonna take it. Nice. I think it's a big improvement over the older Tacoma for sure.
How about you? Which one would you choose, Ryan?
I think I would either go for Tacoma or the GX. I just like the fact that the GX platform offers you that V6 in that Prado 250 platform. I think that's really nice. Probably a base GX just so it's a little bit easier to modify down the road. I think a GX with 6112s or 8112s would be really, really, really nice platform all around.
And I have to choose the Outlander. I have to choose the Tundra. Because I have to haul bigger loads sometimes. We have animals and trailers and live in the mountains hauling wood and things like that. So I think for me, the larger towing capacity and the larger cab and bed and things like that, living out in the country, moving a bunch of stuff around, it's a true truck at that point where you can probably get a piece of plywood in the back without cutting it to fit and close the tailgate and all that kind of stuff. So, but I would do probably do like I have on my first gen Tundra, 6112s, maybe 8112s on that. Just keep it kind of cool. And then, you know, possibly like Shane, I do off-road camping, overlanding type stuff. So
Off-road camping.
yeah, that truck would probably do a fair bit of that as well.
Yeah.
So we kind of went through this quickly. We hope we didn't leave out any facts or anything that you guys needed help with. If we did, please just let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your comments about your thoughts on this new platform or things that you struggle with, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Just let us know. We'd be happy to answer those for you. We're thinking about a new episode for podcast, so if you have any things you'd like us to talk about as far as an upcoming episode, please put that down there as well. And we'll see you all next time on Shock Talk. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.